Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents A Trial of Thorns, a Fae Beauty and the Beast retelling by Helena Rookwood and Elm Vince, narrated by Lucy Brownhill. Chapter 1. A bright light burned against my closed eyes, the velvety blackness around me slipping away. My lashes flickered slowly open, then shut again, the darkness closing back in. No, I need to wake up. I rolled onto my side, softness cradling me, soothing me as I took in my blurred surroundings. I was warm, in bed, safe. My eyes closed again, and a memory flashed to life. Sky blue eyes staring down at me, golden flakes falling, sparking in the light, burning through my lungs. I sat up with a jolt. Where am I? Rough hands grasped my arms, pulling me to my feet. I squinted against the blinding light, dizziness sweeping over me. On either side, two pairs of hands gripped me tighter as I swayed. I wanted to turn and look, but my head wouldn't move. My bare arms tingled at the touch of the sunlight streaming in. A hot flush prickled through my body, a sick, fluttering sensation building in my stomach. Everything was bright and glaring, a piercing white colour instead of the dark, mottled greens of the forest. My captors tugged me forward. I had no energy to resist. A door creaked open, and the sharp morning sunlight flared brighter, clearing the mist in my mind a little. I blinked my dry eyes, trying to rid the blurriness at the edges of my vision, the speckled imprint of light that reminded me of pixie dust. Pixie dust? A memory stirred, then disappeared, like a cloud passing the moon. My head lolled forward, and I stared down at my feet as they tapped over a creamy marble floor, polished to a sheen, and warm against my bare soles. I focused on that sensation as I tried to put together the pieces of where I'd woken. It must be morning. I was inside, and as I frowned down at my legs, I realised I was dressed in clothing I'd never seen before, floating layers of blue organzas shivering around my body, so soft and light it felt like I was wearing nothing at all. "Where?" I croaked, addressing my captors. I swallowed with difficulty, my mouth dry, and a sour taste coating my tongue. "Where am I?" The hands holding me tightened, but no reply came. With great effort, I turned to look at the people on either side of me. Human faces stared vacantly ahead, as if they hadn't heard me. A tall woman with purple rings beneath her eyes, and a thin, square-jawed man. They both wore identical limp tunics, the grey colour of mushrooms. I lifted my heavy head, dragging my gaze from the humans, higher. Above us, the high corridor was open to the pale blue sky. Sunlight streamed in, and I could make out slight shadows flitting around overhead, a glimmer of shining wings flashing behind each of them. Fae. My sluggish brain provided the word, accompanied by that same memory of glittering dust and cold blue eyes. My captors tugged me onward, and I stumbled, my gaze dropping from the Fae fluttering above us. The corridor opened up into a huge, luxurious room, decorated in hazy colours, creamy peaches, pinks and blues, lined with marble pillars thicker than trees and glinting with touches of gold. The sharp smell of citrus lingered, cut through with the bitter aroma of overbrewed tea leaves. Winged little folk flew through the air, bearing huge golden trays laden with fruit and painted teapots. What is this place? "Welcome to the Sky Court, Aster." A familiar voice echoed through the room, sending all the hairs on my body standing on end. My gaze dropped to the large circular table at the centre of the room. Several court fae were seated around the edge, their eyes all pinned to me. I scanned their beautiful faces without recognition, settling on the fae who had spoken, the only one standing. A tall, elegant male with spun gold hair and familiar blue eyes. Faolan, my brain prompted. scattered thoughts of forests and curses and beasts narrowing to one pin-sharp memory. Faolan stole me away. He'd found me in the rose garden, told me he'd come to collect on the bargains I'd inadvertently agreed to, and then spirited me away from the forest. A hot prickle edged down my spine as I clung to that moment, the only coherent recollection I had of why I was here. He was dressed in his usual finery, a frothy white shirt beneath a pale blue velvet jacket, his sun-kissed skin glowing in the light as a smile curved his lips. "Please sit." Faolan indicated the chair opposite him, and my human guards led me to it. My body was pliable in their hands, my limbs too lethargic to react, to pull away. I landed heavily in the gilded chair, and someone pushed it in behind me until the armrests touched the table edge, sealing me in. The chair had an odd, open back that was uncomfortable against my shoulder blades. "Aster, I'd like to introduce my family." Faolan made a sweeping gesture around the table. "My uncle is Ural, and my cousins, Rain, Dawnsong, and Cirrus." The beautiful faces peered at me with polite interest, radiating a soft glow of light, just like Faolan. Each had a pair of wings tucked behind them, filling the gap in the backrest of their chairs. "And this is my sister, Aurora." Faolan indicated the Fae female sitting beside me last. She inclined her head politely, her peach gold hair the colour of a sunrise pouring over one shoulder. Her blue eyes were a shade paler than Faolan's, and, unlike her brother, whose golden wings were sheer, her paper-thin white wings looked like a butterfly's. She nudged one of the plates closer to me. "Please help yourself to breakfast. You must be starving." I'd eaten like this with Faolan before, hadn't I? A vague memory surfaced of another table, at another court. For some reason, the taste of fairy wine swelled rich and sweet at the back of my mouth. I attempted to focus on the golden dish closest to me, heaped with colourful fruits. Some I recognised, apples, damsons, blackberries, but others I'd never seen before, or at least I thought I hadn't. My thoughts were still scattered, like leaves on a breeze. The hot, sick feeling in my stomach gave a twist. How long have I stuttered, still not moving to touch the food. "You've been asleep for 2 months." Faolan replied politely. My body slumped back in the chair, feeling 10 times heavier. 2 months? Impossible. It seemed like no time at all since my last dust-addled memory of the Folkwood. Whatever dreamless dark had filled my time between now and then had given no indication so much time had passed. A gaggle of tiny fairies bearing a huge teapot hovered in the air before me, tilting the pot forward so that fragrant, steaming liquid sloshed into my cup. One of them dropped to my hand, attempting to lift my fingers from the table and heave them toward the teacup, before giving up and fluttering back to the others, with a cross, indecipherable chattering sound. Faolan looked around at his family. "Now that our guest has joined us, let us eat." They all leaned forward, the sounds of clattering silverware and tinkling glass filling the room. It sounded so normal, but nothing about this breakfast was normal. Slowly, I reached for my cup, pinching the cool handle between my finger and thumb. None of this made any sense. Why? The words slipped from my lips in an exhale. All of my questions were gathered in that one word. Why had Faolan betrayed me? Why had he brought me here, to the Sky Court? Why was he treating me like a guest when he'd kept me in an enchanted sleep for months? Faolan just smiled at me magnanimously. I sat up a little straighter, more memories swirling through my mind. Racing through the forest to make it to the tithe, arriving at the cursed court, invisible servants, growing the roses, a fairy revel, learning to enchant, the fight with Yvette, finally breaking the curse on Thorne. His name rang through me like birdsong in the forest. A fist clenched my heart. Faolan had stolen me from Thorne as soon as I'd broken the curse. "Where's Thorne?" I demanded, my voice a little stronger. Faolan's wings twitched behind him.
Right now? I have no idea.
His lips curled into a cold smile.
I've not seen him these past 2 months.
He doesn't know you took me.
I went to great lengths to ensure he didn't.
Faolan replied mildly. My fingers slid around my cup, the tea burning me through the delicate china. Disappointment swelled my chest.
So he doesn't know I'm here? If he did, we certainly would have been paid a visit by now.
I glared across the table at the shining golden Fae, heat spreading through my body, sweat dampening the backs of my knees. In the distance, music started up, a dreamlike flurry of notes from a harp and a chorus of high-pitched voices. What had Thorne thought when he'd awoken to find all traces of me gone? Did he think I'd returned home to Rosehill? I was certain he'd have searched for me, but 2 months was a long time to be missing. A chill ran through me. What if he'd given up? I bit my lip as I stared around the table, the polite, beautiful faces of the Fae Court royal family looking back at me with attentive smiles and cold, shrewd eyes.
Why do this to Thorne?
I demanded. You said you were friends.
We were. A long time ago.
Faolan paused, his gaze drifting to his sister beside me.
Aurora, won't you serve Aster some food? She seems unable to do so herself.
I swallowed hard, meaning to tell him I wasn't hungry, but Aurora already had my plate in her hand, piling it high with delicacies. I set down my teacup. I thought we were friends. I winced, some of the fire going out of my words as I recalled all the times Faolan had helped me at the cursed court. He chatted to me about Faerie, assisted me with my gardening work where he could. He'd saved my life when the Kelpie had attacked me out on the lake. He gave a slight shrug of his shoulders.
I told you the first time we met that you shouldn't trust any of the Fae.
That was true, and I'd known it anyway, something any child of Rosehill could have told you. Yet I'd let my guard down for Faolan. Despite all my Greenwich training, I'd let him win me over with his polite manners and kind words, just because I'd felt so alone in the cursed court. Only for him to shower me in pixie dust and steal me away. My hands shook with anger as I gripped the edge of the marble table.
Why have you brought me here? Ah, that. I'm glad you asked, Aster.
Faolan replaced his spoon on the table, dabbing at the corners of his mouth with a crisp white napkin.
Do you remember what I told you in the Folkwood just before you came here?
My memories were still hazy, but those last moments, when Faolan had betrayed me, were clear. You told me I owed you. Faolan's eyes sparkled.
That is correct.
Aurora placed the plate of food gently in front of me. I bit my lip, clasping my shaking hands in my lap. I wanted to knock the plate to the floor, to scream at Faolan, but it seemed like he was about to tell me what I wanted to know.
What do you know of the Alder Trials, Aster?
Faolan's sing-song voice was light. The Alder Trials? The words sounded familiar, but I couldn't remember where I'd heard them before.
I know of the Alder King,
I said hesitantly, that he rules the kingdom of Faerie. And Thorne is his son, the Alder Prince. A rush of lightheadedness overtook me, and I squeezed my eyes closed, clutching at the arms of my chair.
If you eat, it will help you think more clearly.
A low female voice murmured close to my ear. I opened my eyes, glancing to my right, but Aurora appeared to be sitting perfectly upright, sipping from a goblet. I fumbled for the fork in front of me, my hands still trembling. My plate was filled with tiny roast birds no larger than my little finger, thin slices of bread toasted gold and dotted with currants, pale squares of cheese veined with crimson. After so long unconscious from magic, I knew I needed to eat, but the hot nausea in my stomach made everything on my plate look unappealing. I poked around and found slices of fruit, drizzled with what looked like honey. I put a forkful in my mouth, chewing slowly.
The Alder Trials happen once every 250 years,
Faolan explained.
It's how we decide who will become the Kingdom of Faerie's next Alder King or Queen. Each time the trials take place, they're hosted by a different court. This cycle, the Sky Court has the honour of hosting.
Faolan appraised me from across the table, his long fingers steepled.
The rules state that each court must send an heir to compete, a champion. They participate in a series of challenges. If they succeed, they win the Alder crown.
He paused, studying me as I washed the mouthful of food down with a gulp of now lukewarm tea. Aurora was right. The moment the food hit my stomach, it settled the sickness, sharpening my senses and clearing the fuzziness a little.
Good, Faolan observed. We need your strength back for when the other courts arrive. You have a week to recover before the opening ceremony, where you'll meet the 9 champions.
I set down my cup. 9 champions? I thought there were 10 courts.
So you remember our afternoon in the library, then? It was a most memorable afternoon for me, too.
Faolan flashed me a winning smile.
Now, do you recall what else I said when I showed you the map of the kingdom?
I clenched my jaw, coldness building in my core.
I told you that the Fae draw their magic from the land, and that their magic is linked to their court. Because of that, the host court would hold an advantage if they were allowed to compete in the Alder Trials themselves. That is why there's an amendment to the rules.
A chill crawled up my arms, and my heart quickened. I could feel the eyes of the other Fae at the table on me, hanging on to Faolan's every word.
The host court must select a champion from outside their lands to enter the Alder Trials on their behalf.
He can't mean...
You will be my champion, Aster.
Faolan's face was serious now, all guise of smiling politeness gone.
You owe me 3 favours, and you will pay them by competing in the Alder Trials on behalf of the Sky Court.
Chapter 2. The rest of breakfast passed in a blur, with Faolan refusing to elaborate on what exactly he meant by announcing that I was to be his champion in the Alder Trials. I ate and drank to clear my head, the lethargy leaving my body with each bite. I chewed in silence, not taking in any of the polite murmur of conversation of the Sky Court. How could I stand a chance against Court Fae, whatever these challenges were? I couldn't understand what Faolan was thinking. Why would he ever think that naming me the Sky Court's champion was a good idea? Even with my enchanting magic, I didn't see how I could possibly win against any Fae, let alone heirs to the Fae Courts. It was a death sentence. Unless that was the whole point, but there were easier ways to kill me.
If you're finished, Aster, I'd like to show you more of the Sky Court.
The Sky Prince smoothed down his tan pants as he stood, then walked around the table to pull out my chair. The other court Fae who had been watching me from the corners of their eyes all jolted to their feet, but I remained stubbornly seated. Faolan tugged sharply at the back of my chair.
If you're feeling better, perhaps I might be able to answer some of your questions.
My lips thinned, but I slowly rose. I did need Faolan to answer my questions, but... silver bells. I hated that it would be on his terms. Not to mention he'd worded it in such a carefully vague way. In such a Fae way. Who knew how much exactly he would tell me? Yet what choice did I have other than to try to find out more? I was steady on my feet as I walked alongside Faolan, and comfortably reminded of all the times I'd walked with him in the cursed court, my arm linked through his, basking in his sunshine. I'd been so blind not to see through his golden charms, but I wouldn't let the same happen now, no matter how beautiful his court or how polite his manners. He tricked me, trapped me, and was forcing me into some Fae games on his behalf, all for reasons I still couldn't fathom.
That was just one of our many breakfast rooms, he announced the moment we'd left the others behind us.
We turned down a winding corridor, the white marble gleaming in Fae-light cast from the tiny sprites dancing along the corridors. Unlike in the cursed court, these little folk shone gold, not green. The double doors lining the hallway were so tall I had to tilt my net back to see where they ended. Many had been left open, and Faolan stopped at each one to show me the impossibly beautiful music rooms, libraries, parlours, and ballrooms beyond. Despite everything, the airy opulence took my breath away. Above us, ceilings melted into skies and clouds, and winged folk swooped high above our heads, fluttering from room to room. I made no comment, absorbing the otherworldly beauty in silence, then stopped walking. "I don't want a tour, Faolan." I blew out a breath, my hands fisting in the unfamiliar material of my floating blue skirts. "I want answers. You can't just announce I'm going to be your champion in some Fae games and expect me not to ask more about it." Faolan just took my elbow and guided me to the side of the corridor, glancing around. "You struck 3 bargains with me, and I'm making it simple to repay them." His voice was low and silky. "I've told you exactly what they're worth to me. Your participation in 3 of the Alder Trials representing the Sky Court. The winners from each trial go through to the next, and the winner of the final trial becomes the Alder heir, in line to become the next Alder king or queen. I'd like to see the next Alder king seated in the Sky Court, Aster." I pulled my arm away from him. I knew Faolan couldn't lie, but I doubted he was telling me everything. "You make it sound so simple, but a human competing against Fae—" "You're not just any human, Aster." He gave me a charming smile. "You're an enchantress, a breaker of curses." My lips pursed. Faolan was right. I did have power of my own, but I was no longer in the folkwood, and my power relied on plants. I was yet to see one sprig of greenery as we walked around the Sky Court. He began walking again, slowly, and I followed him. Are humans even allowed to compete for the Fae throne? "The rules say that the host court must nominate a champion outside of their lands. There are no further specifications." "And how do these trials work?" I asked. "What if I don't make it past the first one?" Faolan's eyes clouded over, the blue darkening. "You owe me 3 favours. If you don't make it past the first trial, I will still have 2 bargains to collect on. Of course." His tone lightened. "If you die in the first trial, then that's another matter. You're free." My steps faltered, my heartbeat ratcheting up a notch. If I die? We have very different definitions of being free. I fell silent as we stepped out into a large hall, dozens of alabaster balconies jutting out above our heads. "I'll need to fly you to your chambers from here." Faolan offered his arm. I glanced around. There were no staircases to be seen, no obvious doorways leading out of the grand maze of rooms. The only way out seemed to be up into the sky. "All of the court Fae here have wings," Faolan explained when I hesitated. "So the Sky Court is built to accommodate that means of travel." Heat flared in my stomach as I stared at his proffered arm. The last time Faolan had flown me anywhere, he hadn't given me much choice. Even now, that choice was just an illusion. Fine. My palm brushed against his velvet sleeve, setting my teeth on edge. He moved around to sweep me into his arms, just as he'd done before when he'd stolen me away from the cursed court. His warm, glowing body couldn't quell the goosebumps that rose in an icy rush across my skin. A soft buzz emanated from his blurred wings as we spun and rose into the air. His grasp was gentle, the motion slow and controlled, but my stomach lurched anyway. I tried to ignore the marble floor growing smaller, and instead focused on what was level with us. The higher we climbed, the more luxurious the rooms appeared. Fine paintings came into view, depicting perfect winged fae. Gold leaf laced the tops of the columns, and above them, thick gilt mirrors reflected the light as well as the unsettling image of myself in Faolan's arms. My skin was pale, my dark hair a tangle over one shoulder. Being this high off the ground brought back some of the dizziness from earlier, and my palms grew damp. But despite my bodily reaction, I tried not to close my eyes, to take in my surroundings as best I could. I needed to look if I ever hoped to escape. If I even could escape this place. I chewed my lip. The Sky Court was built for winged fae, and without question, that would hinder me. How could I explore by myself if I had to be escorted everywhere by one of my enemies? As Faolan flew us higher, thin wisps of cloud rippled over my skin, water droplets condensing on my eyelashes. All of the fae flying in the hall paused and hovered as we passed them, eager eyes watching their prince cradling me in his arms. Faolan ignored the stares, although I couldn't help noticing how he turned slightly so each fae could get a good look at me, leaving hushed whispers echoing in our wake. Of course, there was one other way I might still get out of here. "What about Thorne?" I asked suddenly, and Faolan's body tensed slightly beneath mine. "You said the other courts will be arriving in a few days. He's the heir to the forest court, isn't he?" My heart strained against my chest at the thought of seeing Thorne again. He could shadow us away. He would know how to get me out of the bargains that bound me to Faolan.
When the summons went out for the trials earlier this year, Thorne was still cursed. His younger brother Fern replied, he was the heir to the forest court while Thorne was banished.
Disappointment stuck in my throat. But Thorne's no longer cursed.
No, he is not.
Faolan's voice was tight.
You saw to that. But just because he's the rightful heir, it doesn't mean he'll be rushing back to his duties at the forest court.
His tone soured.
Historically, Thorne has never been one to embrace responsibility. He'd much rather cavort around with his friends.
If Thorne wasn't attending the Alder Trials, he would have no other reason to come to the Sky Court. He had no idea I was here. I was going to have to get out of here on my own. We landed lightly on yet another beautiful balcony, and I slid eagerly from Faolan's hot arms, glad to have firm ground beneath my feet and some distance from the shining fae. Beyond, the balcony melted into vast chambers, easily 5 times the size of my rooms at the Cursed Court. Faolan's amused voice rang out from behind me.
"Welcome to your chambers, Aster, breaker of curses."
"I'm not your guest, Faolan, betrayer of trusts." I bit my tongue, my gaze skimming the room. The huge canopied bed, numerous closets and ornate vase of flowers atop a dressing table couldn't stop the space from feeling empty. There were no windows, I noticed. The morning light spilled in through the balcony we'd landed on, and a fire crackled in a golden hearth on the far side of the room. I glanced up. Unlike the dining room and the halls, the room had an actual ceiling, painted to look like a dreamlike sky. Tiny, winged little folk wielding white feathers dusted a huge chandelier that dripped with clear, sparkling stones. If this was the same place I'd woken earlier, I didn't recognize it.
"All of this is yours during your stay,"
Faolan announced, his voice echoing slightly as he stepped into the room. He stalked past towering marble pillars and halted beside the closets lining the walls, pulling back the cream doors to reveal a pastel rainbow of soft, floating materials.
"All of these gowns are the height of Sky Court fashion."
He pulled out dresses in dawn peach, sky blue and dusky purple, the fabrics light as air. I clamped my lips closed. If he was expecting gratitude... A flicker of irritation ran over his perfect features when I didn't respond. But before he could say any more, a knock sounded from somewhere across the room.
"Yes?"
Faolan called out. A door I hadn't noticed opened inward. So there is another way in.
"Ah!"
Faolan looked pleased at the timing of the intrusion.
"Aster, let me introduce you to your servants. They'll cater to your every whim while you're with us."
2 young girls edged into the room, dressed in drab grey tunics. Their eyes were distant, cast down toward the floor. Their humanness looked utterly out of place in a room as grand as this.
"Prepare your new mistress's bed."
Faolan flicked an arm toward the huge bed.
"She'll need more rest to recover from the pixie dust."
Without replying, they moved slowly in the direction he'd pointed.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?